Ah, the Romans, masters of war, builders of empires, and consumers of some truly bizarre delicacies. Today we're delving into the stranger side of Roman life, where rodents were considered a delicacy and bird droppings were consulted for life advice. Intrigued? You should be. Let's dive in. Prepare yourself, because the Romans, those masters of engineering and law, were also connoisseurs of dormice. Yes, you heard me right. Those tiny, furry creatures that most people try to keep out of their pantries were considered a delicacy in ancient Rome. Imagine sitting down to a grand Roman feast, surrounded by marble columns and flowing wine. But wait, what's that being presented on a silver tray with such reverence? Why, it's a roasted dormouse, of course. Stuffed with nuts and spices, it was considered a true culinary delight. Dormice, really? But before you wrinkle your noses in disgust, let's delve a bit deeper into this peculiar culinary custom. Now, before you picture Romans chasing after these furry creatures with nets, let's set the record straight. Dormice weren't exactly everyday fare. They were more of a delicacy, enjoyed by the upper echelons of Roman society. Think of them as the caviar or truffles of the Roman world, a culinary status symbol. Romans went to great lengths to ensure their dormice were plump and flavorful. They had special clay pots called gladiatorial, designed specifically for fattening up these little critters. Talk about gourmet rodents. It might seem strange to us now, but to the Romans, dormice were a tasty treat that added a touch of extravagance to their already lavish feasts. Now, you might be wondering, what did these honey-roasted rodents actually taste like? Well, accounts from ancient Roman writers describe the flavor as being somewhere between pork and chicken, with a slightly sweet and nutty finish. Apicius, the Roman equivalent of Gordon Ramsay, even included a recipe for stuffed dormice in his famous cookbook, De Culinary. Imagine, if you will, the scene in a Roman kitchen, chefs scurrying about, preparing elaborate dishes with exotic ingredients, and in the corner a clay pot filled with plump, slumbering dormice awaiting their fate. Once roasted to perfection, they would be carefully arranged on a platter, perhaps garnished with a drizzle of honey and a sprinkle of herbs. Would you be brave enough to try a bite of this ancient Roman delicacy? Or would you stick to the grapes and figs? The Roman fascination with dormice might seem strange at first glance, but it highlights a universal truth. What we consider normal when it comes to food is largely shaped by our cultural upbringing. After all, many cultures around the world enjoy delicacies that others might find unusual. Escargots in France, chicken feet in China, or even haggis in Scotland. So, the next time you encounter a food that seems utterly bizarre, take a moment to appreciate the cultural context behind it. You might be surprised by what you learn, and who knows, you might even be tempted to try a bite. But before you rush off to search for dormouse recipes online, let's move on to our next bizarre Roman custom. Hold on to your laurel wreaths, folks, because we're about to explore a Roman custom that's truly for the birds. You see, the Romans took their superstitions very seriously, and when it came to predicting the future, they had a rather unique method augury. Now, you might think of augury as something out of a Harry Potter novel, but to the Romans it was a highly respected practice, entrusted to specially trained priests called augurs. These wise men, and yes, they were usually men, were tasked with interpreting the will of the gods by observing the behavior of birds, their flight patterns, their calls, even their droppings. Will the flight of an eagle signal victory, or will the cawing of a crow spell doom? In a world without weather apps or crystal balls, the Romans relied on these feathered forecasters to guide their decisions, both big and small. Talk about high-stakes birdwatching. But before you dismiss it as utter nonsense, let's delve a bit deeper into this ancient practice, shall we? Now, before you picture Romans tweeting about rare bird sightings with the hashtag #auspicium, let's get one thing straight. Roman augury was a far cry from a leisurely stroll through the park with a pair of binoculars. This was serious business, steeped in tradition and ritual. The augur would begin by marking out a sacred space called a templum with his curved staff, or lituus. This space was aligned with the cardinal directions, creating a symbolic connection between the earthly realm and the heavens. Only then would he turn his attention to the skies, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The augur was like a feathered Sherlock Holmes, piecing together clues from the avian world to decipher the will of the gods. Now, you might be wondering, What did the Romans think these birds were actually saying? Well, they believed that the gods communicated through signs and omens and that birds were their messengers. Each species had its own symbolic meaning, and the augur's job was to interpret these messages within the context of the specific question or event at hand. For example, the flight of an eagle soaring high in the sky was often interpreted as a sign of divine favor and victory. On the other hand, the sight of a raven with its black plumage and mournful croaking was often taken as a sign of impending doom. Ravens were associated with death and the underworld, and their presence was rarely welcomed. And then there were the crows, those intelligent and mischievous creatures that seemed to delight in tormenting the Romans. Crows were tricksters, capable of mimicking human speech and often associated with bad luck. But they were also highly observant creatures, and their behavior was thought to reveal hidden truths. The Roman practice of augury might seem like a strange and superstitious relic of the past, but it offers a fascinating glimpse into the Roman worldview. The Romans were a deeply religious people, and they believed that the gods played an active role in their lives. Augury was their way of seeking guidance from the divine, of trying to understand the patterns and meanings woven into the fabric of existence. So the next time you see a flock of birds soaring overhead, take a moment to appreciate the ancient practice of augury. It might not predict your future, but it just might inspire you to look at the world with a fresh perspective. But enough about birds for now. Get ready for our next bizarre Roman custom, where good luck charms take on a rather phallic form. Fasten your togas, viewers, because we're about to delve into a Roman custom that's as cheeky as it is fascinating. You see, the Romans, those masters of conquest and concrete, also had a rather unusual approach to good luck. Forget four-leaf clovers and rabbit's feet. In ancient Rome, the symbol of fortune came in a rather more pointed form. Yes, we're talking about phalluses, or to be more precise, representations of phalluses. These weren't hidden away in some dark corner. They were proudly displayed on everything from jewelry to household items, even integrated into the architecture of their buildings. Imagine strolling down a Roman street, passing by shops adorned with phallic wind chimes and houses with phallic-shaped door knockers. It's like a scene straight out of a Monty Python sketch. But before you dismiss it as mere Roman bawdiness, let's delve a bit deeper into the meaning behind these ubiquitous symbols. Now, before you get the wrong idea, let's be clear, the Roman fascination with phalluses wasn't about promoting promiscuity or anything of that sort. It was about tapping into a primal, symbolic power that transcended the merely physical. The phallus, in its various forms, was seen as a potent charm, capable of warding off evil spirits, bringing good fortune, and even ensuring a bountiful harvest. And the Romans weren't shy about displaying their lucky charms. Phallic amulets were worn by men, women, and even children. They were hung above doorways to protect homes from evil, incorporated into mosaics and frescoes, and even carved into the stonework of public buildings. These symbols were an integral part of Roman life, woven into the fabric of their beliefs and daily rituals. Now, you might be wondering, why the phallus? Of all of the symbols in the world, why choose that one? Well, it all goes back to ancient beliefs about fertility and the power of creation. In a world where infant mortality was high, and a good harvest could mean the difference between feast and famine, it's no surprise that people sought out symbols that represented life, abundance, and the continuation of the species. The phallus, with its obvious connection to procreation, was a natural choice. It was a visual reminder of the life-giving force that ensured the survival of both individuals and the community as a whole. And it wasn't just about biological fertility either. The phallus also symbolized prosperity, good fortune, and the ability to overcome obstacles. Even the food wasn't safe from this symbolic trend. During certain festivals, the Romans would bake special loaves of bread shaped like phalluses, which were then eaten as part of the celebrations. The Roman use of phallic symbols might seem a tad, well, over the top to our modern sensibilities, but it's important to remember that these symbols held a very different meaning in ancient Roman culture. They weren't meant to be shocking or offensive. They were simply a reflection of a different set of beliefs and values. Besides, let's be honest, there's something inherently amusing about the Roman approach to good luck. It's a reminder that even the most powerful empire in the world had its quirks and eccentricities. So the next time you're feeling unlucky, instead of reaching for a rabbit's foot, why not consider the Roman approach? Just be sure to keep it discreet. You don't want to cause a stir. Unleashing the chaos. It's Saturnalia time. Hold on to your togas, viewers, because things are about to get wild. Forget your gladiator games and chariot races. We're about to delve into the most chaotic, the most outrageous, the most Roman festival of them all. Saturnalia. Picture this. For an entire week starting on December 17th, the Roman world turned topsy-turvy. Work was forgotten, schools were closed, and the usual social order was thrown out the window faster than a half-eaten dormouse at a feast. Yes, Saturnalia was Rome's ultimate break from reality, a time when everyone, from the wealthiest senator to the humblest slave, embraced the spirit of revelry and unrestrained merrymaking. Think of it as a mix between Mardi Gras, April Fool's Day, and that one crazy office party nobody talks about, all rolled into one glorious, chaotic week. So, loosen those togas, grab a goblet of wine, and prepare for some serious Saturnalia shenanigans. Now, you might be wondering, who was Saturn and why did he inspire such a wild party? Well, buckle up because we're about to take a trip back in time to unravel the origins of this extraordinary Roman tradition. Masters and slaves redefined a week of hilarity and subversion. Saturnalia was dedicated to Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture and wealth. During Saturn's reign, known as the Golden Age, everyone lived in blissful equality. No work, no poverty, just endless feasting and merriment. Saturnalia recreated that mythical utopia, at least for a short while. The most striking aspect was the temporary reversal of roles between masters and slaves. For 1 week, slaves were free from duties and could speak their minds. They could wear their masters' clothes, gamble, and even playfully insult them. It was all in good fun, a way to let off steam and acknowledge shared humanity. From feasting to gambling, the unbridled joys of Saturnalia. Saturnalia took feasting to a whole new level. Tables groaned under roasted meats, exotic fruits, sweet pastries, and rivers of wine. But it wasn't just about food. Games, gambling, and merriment were everywhere. Even chariot races filled the streets. Gift-giving was also key, with gag gifts called sigillaria, like humorous clay figurines. For a week, Rome was consumed by laughter, music, and the joyful spirit of shared celebration. A time for reflection. Saturnalia's enduring legacy. Saturnalia, with its chaotic blend of role reversal, feasting, and unbridled merriment, might seem like a distant echo from a bygone era, but its influence can still be felt today. Many of our modern-day holiday traditions, from gift-giving to feasting to even the tradition of wearing silly hats, can be traced back to this ancient Roman festival. Beyond the superficial similarities, Saturnalia also offers a timeless reminder of the importance of social equality, however fleeting it might be. The temporary suspension of social norms during the festival allowed for a brief glimpse into a world where everyone, regardless of their social standing, could share in the joy of celebration. So the next time you're caught up in the frenzy of holiday preparations, take a moment to remember Saturnalia. Remember the Romans who knew how to throw a party like no other, and who understood that sometimes the best way to celebrate life is to embrace the chaos, to challenge the status quo, and to simply enjoy the moment. But our journey through bizarre Roman customs doesn't end here. Well, viewers, it seems we've reached the end of our journey. Or have we? While most of our bizarre Roman customs have involved food, festivities, and a healthy dose of phallic symbolism, we now turn our attention to a more somber affair: Roman funerals. Now, you might think that death is a universal experience, something that transcends cultural boundaries, and you'd be right to a certain extent. But the Romans, true to form, had their own unique and often extravagant way of dealing with death. Forget quiet whispers and solemn hymns. Roman funerals were more like theatrical productions, complete with elaborate processions, professional mourners, and enough food to feed a legion. It was as if they were determined to make death itself a grand spectacle, a fitting tribute to a life lived in the heart of the Roman Empire. So, grab your handkerchiefs, or perhaps a spare toga, as we explore the fascinating and, yes, sometimes bizarre world of Roman funerals. You might be surprised by what you learn, and just maybe you'll find a new appreciation for your own mortality. In ancient Rome, a funeral wasn't just a private affair for close family and friends. It was a public event, a chance for the entire community to pay their respects. The Romans, being masters of spectacle, knew how to put on a show. The funeral procession was the main event, a grand parade through the streets. The more important the deceased, the more elaborate the procession. Imagine a slow-moving cavalcade of musicians, mourners, actors, and even dancers. At the head marched the praefecti, professional mourners hired to wail and lament. These women were skilled in the art of grief, their voices rising and falling in a mournful chorus. Funerals fit for an emperor. When grief met extravagance. For the Roman elite, funerals showcased their wealth and influence, and no one outdid the emperors in extravagance. Their funerals were legendary, lasting days with grand spectacles. Imagine a golden chariot drawn by white horses carrying the emperor's effigy. Crowds showered the procession with flowers and perfumes. Actors dressed as ancestors walked alongside, showcasing lineage. Gladiatorial games honored the deceased emperor. Epic clashes between skilled warriors were part of the spectacle. The roar of the crowd and the sight of fallen gladiators sent the emperor off in style. Pause, 1S, life, death, and the art of letting go. A Roman perspective. The Roman approach to death might seem a bit over the top to our modern sensibilities, but it's important to remember that death held a very different meaning in ancient Roman culture. It was seen as a transition, a passage from one realm of existence to another. And what better way to mark this transition than with a grand celebration? The elaborate processions, the professional mourners, the gladiatorial games, they were all a part of a complex ritual designed to help the living cope with the loss of a loved one. It was a way of expressing their grief, of honoring the deceased, and of ultimately letting go. So the next time you attend a funeral, take a moment to reflect on the Roman approach to death. You might not want to hire a professional mourner or stage a gladiatorial combat, but you might find something to admire in their willingness to embrace the full spectrum of human emotions, even in the face of death. And with that, we come to the end of our exploration of bizarre Roman customs. From dormice to death, a final toast to Roman bizarreness. Well, there you have it, viewers. We've journeyed through Roman history, unearthing fascinating customs, from dormice delicacies to phallic symbols in their homes. The Romans kept things interesting, consulting birds for guidance and theatrical funerals. Saturnalia, the ultimate Roman rager. These customs offer a glimpse into a civilization not so different from our own. Join the conversation. What's your favorite bizarre bit of history? So, as we bid farewell to the Roman Empire, don't worry, they'll be back in a future video, we're left with one final thought. History is anything but boring. Beneath the surface of dates, battles, and political intrigue lies a treasure trove of bizarre customs, quirky beliefs, and downright hilarious anecdotes that remind us that our ancestors were just as human as we are. What have we learned from our Roman adventure? That sometimes the best way to understand the past is to embrace its strangeness, to laugh at its absurdities, and to marvel at the sheer ingenuity and occasional madness of the human spirit. Now it's your turn. What's the most bizarre historical custom you've ever heard of? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let's keep the conversation going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next historical deep dive. Until next time, Valetta.